In today's episode, we discuss magical tattoos, enemy strategy, world building, and making our own custom magic items. This is the DM Shower Thoughts. Welcome back. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the DM Shower Thoughts, the show where we talk about our shower thoughts in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, as well as other tabletop scenarios, and becoming your best self through gaming. My name is Adamus.
Oh, I'm John. Hello.
I'm Ian.
All right. Now we are going to pick it up right kind of where we left off last time, where we were in a reference, not a reference document, the spells and tattoos of the Unearthed Arcana. We got through all the cool spells and had quite a discussion, vibrant discussion from that. And now we're going to get into spell tattoos or just magical tattoos. And this comes from a variant for body modification. So, and these items don't necessarily have to be limited to just tattoos. They become other options, but they're described as tattoos more specifically because it's, like inscribing runic ink upon your body to have certain effects. A lot of these require attunement as well as they have rarities, so you can treat them kind of like items, and they're pretty interesting. We're going to go through each of the individual tattoos and their description, and then kind of talk about where our thoughts are on them. But before we get into that, do you gents have any general thoughts about what you've seen about these tattoos, and any thoughts on those?
No thoughts on the tattoos in particular. I do think it's interesting that their rarity has to do with their coverage. So, like, if you have a common magic tattoo, it only needs to be like 6 inches big. If you want a very rare tattoo, it's got to cover 2 limbs, the chest or the upper back. Like, it's like, there's like specific, like the amount of tattoo that happens.
Yeah.
It like determines how powerful it can be. I think that's a pretty interesting.
And that creates almost a different kind of resource management where you're actually, managing the coverage on your body is kind of interesting. You have to think about, where would I put this in order to also not just say, oh, I have 3 attunement slots. I have this much coverage on my body to use to get this extra thing.
Yeah, and I like this because it's exploring a type of culture that we really haven't covered too much. I feel like in D&D, which has to do with more like you can look at like Polynesian cultures or Aztec cultures where there was a lot of tattooing going on, and they had this symbolism connected to it. So I like the idea of just being able to, instead of having like a physical item, you're incorporating your magic item into your physical being. And I like that the doors that kind of opens up for speculation into how Arcana really works in D&D and just in general, because like we claim to know how it works because we have spells, but like, do we really,
Yeah.
Yeah, and how can it be reflavored too, I guess, is the other thing. So like this is a big one I find with like the higher level arcane focuses that you find in like the Dungeon Master's Guide. You have like a staff of healing or a rod of absorption. Like, does it have to be those things? Like, Adam was really cool. He let Karama have it be like 2 bracelets. So he's got like a bracelet of healing, a bracelet of the woodlands, because as like an iconography, I don't really like having him use a staff. Like I'd rather him just be able to cast, Mm-hmm. So the fact that you can use your body as a medium for the arcane power, this is really just a flavoring tool set in that case.
Yeah. Grails had in book 1, we had approached the idea that you could tattoo spells, specifically spells to like burn off of you, just like a spell scroll, but your body was the scroll, which created the kind of grosser dark mechanic of having like a Skinner or someone who like would go for that stuff, which is just gross. And we decided to divert away from that kind of approach because that's just silly and ugh.
Really?
Ew.
Put the lotion in the basket.
It's so bad. But the idea of tattoos was still very interesting. And looking at these, like instead of tattoos, would they then be ashers and strains? And those are like an asher is a different kind of potion, because potions are very rare in Grey Owls, or magic is kind of broken. So everything that's healing wise, there's something that the rich have, and there's a striation there. But anyway, going into those, the ashers and the strains are ways to get magic. And instead of them having just like, well, it's a trade of a 1-to-1 of this spell to this spell into a potion, I like that it almost follows this format of the tattoos. The tattoos aren't just a 1-to-1 changeover of you get this spell in tattoo form. There are specific outcomes that you're going for with the tattoos that can follow some of the path and thought trains of different spells, but they're not just those spells. They give you new options.
Well, and I do like the idea you mentioned of like, when you use the tattoo, it like burns off, which isn't what these tattoos are, but I like it as like an alternative. Like you can also have tattoos function like this. And then it now begs the question, like, how good is your tattoo artist? Are they good enough to make the tattoo permanent, or is it a cheaper, quicker tattoo that does get consumed when you use it? So I do like the consumable approach as well. But it's just not what's here.
Yeah, and that's what's going on. We'll circle back to it, but that's what's happening with Grey Owls, is having that. And I like the way you just described that there's a different skill level, because I want to use these spell tattoos in Grey Owls. They are legal for the use, legal for use in the campaign. But there's a split of skill level. So if you want something permanent, you should look for a good tattoo smith of certain skill level. Whereas if you want something that's like a spell scroll, and that's what you can afford, then you find a more standard artist. Or if you just want a tattoo, you have the artist below that. All right, so looking into these, our first tattoo is the Absorbing Tattoo. It is considered a wondrous item in this case, but it's a tattoo, and it is very rare, so we won't reference all the time for this, but 2 limbs or the chest or upper back. Like it's a large spread of your body. And the Absorbing Tattoo it emphasizes one color more than others, and that color determines resistance to a certain element. Now, can this be determined randomly, or the DM chooses it, like when you try to get this tattoo? But there's an added bonus to this. So while you're wearing it, you have resistance to this damage type. You have acid, cold, fire, force, lightning, necrotic, poison, psychic, radiant, or thunder. But also, you have an option once per dawn to gain immunity to that damage type as a reaction. So when you damage absorption, and you get absorption. So when you take damage of the chosen type, you can use your reaction to gain immunity against that instance of the damage, just that one instance. And you regain a number of hit points equal to half the damage you would have taken. And then once this is used, it can't be used again until the next dawn. And this tattoo requires attunement. I like that a lot, just because it creates, it's not just so simple as you have resistance to this element. You have resistance and an immunity option once per dawn. So you have a choice to be able to take a little bit of that element, which I like.
Yeah, I do think that this is more of a system thing. So we have the tattoo attunement, which all of these tend to have, where you start with a needle, you trace the tattoo, and then the needle becomes the ink in your body. And if you choose to end the attunement, the needle pops out again as like an object. So I kind of like the alternative better, where if you end your attunement, the tattoo just loses its power. But if you reattune, it regains its power.
Yeah, I would have it glow or something. Like there's like a gentle arcanic extra glow that comes off of it. And if it's not attuned, then it's just ink on your body.
Yeah. But it's one of those interesting things, because this can also just be reflavored to another item if you want it to be. Like if you wanted bracers of absorption, Like, you just don't have the tattoo element, but it's still a magic item that you can find in the world or use in the world. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah, and when it comes to the when it comes to like attuning and stuff like that, the way you guys were talking about it, it's kind of like how you prepare spells. Like for example, as a cleric, you can prepare any spells on the cleric list for as long as you have the enough spells and spell slots according to your level. But like this, it's instead of like spell slots and stuff, it's like your whole body. So I think it's pretty interesting. If we were to do it that way, I think that would be a little bit more intuitive. But I can also see why they would do it like this, because it could be like, for example, if you decide that you don't want this tattoo anymore, but it's like, permanent, then how are you gonna like get rid of it or something? So, or for example, give it to somebody else. So if you decide that you don't need this tattoo anymore, but your cleric needs a little bit more resistance against like, I don't know, radiant damage or whatever, then that could be a way you transfer it. So.
Not that we're encouraging sharing needles or anything, but yeah, I guess you could.
I kind of, in a way, it creates a permanence to this benefit. So if you're going to invest in this benefit, you need to think about it. Or if you don't want it anymore, that it would have to be removed. So you'd have to have a tattoo removal artist.
Yeah.
A magical tattoo removal artist, or a transference artist. And wouldn't that be interesting from a world building perspective to create options like that? You could actually, I wouldn't say you have to quest for it really, but you do have to seek people out of different skill sets. Oh, I can't transfer this. This is too difficult. Or you'll get a scar if I remove this. When then you have a higher skilled artist, and I can remove this and you'll be fine. I can also transfer this exact ink onto someone else, for a small fee or a quest or a favor or something. There are options there that you can start to reflavor how this is passed, as opposed to shared.
Yeah, and speaking of world building, it would be interesting to note what classes would tend to use this kind of magic item versus classes that would kind of stay away from it. So one of the things I think back on is something like the Druid, right? So in the errata that we talked about a while ago, or Sage Advice, it clarified that Druids can wear metal. It's just that in the default lore, they choose not to. So would a Druid be okay inscribing a tattoo on their body, or might they have some kind of, or a cleric have some kind of belief that isn't allowed for their philosophy or religion, And then also maybe 4 Elements Monk has it in its PHB entry that a lot of times those monks will use tattoos as kind of focuses for the spells that they can cast. So maybe a monk is more likely to use this, whereas another character isn't. So also, what else could the tattoo be besides a magic item? So one of the things that came to my mind was, what if a warlock's patron takes the form of a tattoo on them?
I've done that before.
We have plenty of examples in media of they have some kind of tattoo that talks to them. So an example is from Naruto, you have Sasuke in the first arc in the Chunin exams where Orochimaru bites him and he has this mark that keeps growing on him and it influences behavior. This is a really silly example, but in Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue, there was a story arc where the Titanium Ranger had a cobra, and the more times he morphed into a Power Ranger, the cobra would get closer and closer to his neck. Yeah. And once it got to his neck, he died. And that's when Power Rangers was hardcore. They're
Power Rangers
you
metal.
Could die. And then Power Rangers got lame, and they're like, you might get hurt. No, I liked when my Power Rangers could die. But I'm a different kind of person. I said, Ian, just as a quick recap, what if the tattoo is a patron? So like the patron lives on the warlock's body as a tattoo, and sometimes like you see them talking to each other and stuff. Like,
oh my god, that's such a Maui moment. Really, from Moana.
I
Like,
haven't watched Moana.
oh well, he's it's Polynesian culture, so he has these tattoos on him that mark his adventures and his various things that he's accomplished over his life. But he also has like a little mini Maui, which is like just a little figurine of him that like he talks to, and like he
and it moves around his body.
Yeah, it's pretty much exactly what you're saying. So that's just kind of funny that you're mentioning that. I was gonna say that that would be pretty interesting if you considered like a tattoo with the otherworldly form spell attached to it from those new spells, where you by embracing your patron more during combat, you basically like activate the tattoo and take on the otherworldly form. That would be a pretty cool flavor.
Otherworldly form being them.
Yeah, exactly. Like you turn. I've actually been playing a little bit with the concept of aspecting gods and deities and things. So I think it would be pretty interesting that you're basically almost letting them take over in exchange for more power.
Yeah.
So I like that idea.
Yeah, giving them a vessel to walk and explore the world in. Yeah, and that actually now starts to back to Adam's thing about tattoos as spells that are on your body. Like instead of using a spell slot or a concentration slot for otherworldly form, what if it's like this absorbing one where it's just a once per dawn kind of thing, where it's like I have this one resource I can blow at some point. This is where I go, otherworldly form, boom, wings, extra attack, all 9 yards, So like, what if it was not a spell that you spend a spell slot, but more like just part of your being that's been kind of inscribed on you magically? That's definitely an interesting kind of angle to it.
Yeah. Continuing forward, we have the barrier tattoo. It varies for rarity, so requires attunement and all that. I think all these do. Now, this is an armor tattoo. It depicts protective imagery, uses ink that resembles liquid metal. While you aren't wearing armor, the tattoo grants you an armor class depending on your tattoo's rarity, as shown below. So you get uncommon, which is 12 plus your dex mod, rare, which is 15 plus your dexterity modifier, so a maximum of +2, and then very rare, which is 18. And you can use a shield and still gain this benefit. This is ideal for, I'd say, a wizard or so, or like a spellcaster that can't wear armor. So suddenly you can have, an 18 armor class for a wizard. It's pretty baller. But this is the armor tattoo. It's pretty straightforward.
And then you add more magic items onto it, like cloak protection and everything, ring of protection. I mean, it's a good thing they require attunement, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's nice too because like it's funny, the classes you think might benefit from this probably don't. So like when I first read it, I'm like, oh, maybe like a monk would like that. And then I'm like, actually, AC calculations don't stack, so a monk would probably actually not want this. Yeah. Because that would disrupt their unarmored defense at the level that they would get it where it's worth it, So a monk might have like a bracer or something, but like Adam said, like having like a wizard and finding a way for a wizard to get a shield proficiency so that they have this tattoo that gives them an AC of 18. They've got their shield on one arm or like a magic shield. That can be a really like fascinating character build if you can get this moving forward,
Exactly. The next tattoo that we have is an attack tattoo. It has like attack elements to it. It is called the Coiling Grasp. This tattoo has long intertwining designs. While the tattoo is on your skin, you can, as an action, cause the tattoo to extrude into inky tendrils, which reach for a creature you can see within 15 feet of you. The creature must succeed on a DC 14 strength saving throw, or take 3d6 force damage and be grappled by you. As an action, the creature can escape the grapple by succeeding on a DC 14 strength, athletics, or dexterity acrobatics check. The grapple also ends if you halt it, no action required. If the creature is ever more than 15 feet from you, or 15 feet away from you, or if you use this tattoo on a different creature. So if they can, break the range and snap it just like a witch bolt. And if you do it again on somebody else. I just have this great image of like a robed warlock just go and like vines and tendrils shoot out of the robe and attach to somebody. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think it like for me it doesn't have to be tendrils. Like to me this is like the scorpion maneuver where it's like it's the same kind of thing, but they have like the whip that goes out and kind of grapples them. And
just like we've said in the past, when we like want to change the what it looks like, I can see chains, or coming up soon for Night Owls, worms. It's just crazy stuff like that. But the idea is that it's something that shoots out and wraps around somebody. You could have them be invisible, purplish spectral tendrils or ghostly chains, depending on, and I think it might have a lot to do in this case with depending on who inscribes the tattoo. Maybe there's a certain flavor, or maybe it changes over time as you continue to change. Like maybe your actions change the way the tattoo mingles with your body. Who knows?
But I just think there's so many like valid characters that fight like that, where they like Castlevania too, like Trevor Belmont. He has the whip and he kind of wraps it around something. But so far in 5th edition's rules as written, there hasn't been an option to allow you to do it. It's kind of like, you can mess around with thrown weapon fighting, but when they printed the UA, that's like it's a fighting style. It's like that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, so it's bothersome how much whips have been just overlooked or unused in 5th edition. And in Pathfinder, there's a ton of whip rules. They're very complicated, but at least if you really got into the nitty gritty about it, you could be a very effective whip monk or whip style fighter. Like you could be very effective with its use, but then whips are like 1d4. Woohoo!
Well, they're 1d4 reach finesse weapons, so you can sneak attack with a melee weapon. So it has its place, and I've seen the Zen Weaver build. I've seen it be used well. It's one of those. I like this. This is a much clearer option to me.
Yeah, and I've been slight tangent, but it ties back, I promise. I've been looking at Waterdeep a lot lately, and in Waterdeep, they have the City Watch and the City Guard, and I've just been thinking about like how do magic police work in D&D? You know what I mean? So these guys could, like the City Guard, for example. Maybe they have these tattoos. Maybe like as part of becoming a city guard, you have this kind of a tattoo that allows you to apprehend criminals or something like that because, magic exists. So why wouldn't you be equipped to deal with it? Another thing I've been thinking about is there's a magic item. I think it's called the Ball of Iron Bands or something.
Yeah.
And I like that idea as like almost like magic handcuffs too. Like the police, like they mass produce it or something in Waterdeep, and the police are equipped with it so that like they can easily, control a situation. So this really speaks to me as like what would my NPCs be doing with this kind of magic on the table as well. Even thinking about like mage hunters and things like that. They like use these. It's like a Batman moment. I become the darkness so I can fight the darkness, that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's just really exciting to play with.
The next one that we have is a little bit interesting. The Eldritch Claw is uncommon. It depicts claw-like forms and other jagged shapes, okay? But while the tattoo is on your skin, your unarmed strikes are considered magical for the purpose of overcoming immunity and resistance to non-magical attacks, and you gain a +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls with unarmed strikes. You also have an additional option as a bonus action. You can use a thing called Eldritch Maul. You can empower the tattoo for 1 minute as a bonus action. For the duration, each of your melee weapon attacks can reach a target up to 30 feet away from you, as the ink from your There's tendrils of ink launched from your weapon or unarmed strike toward the target. So weapon or unarmed strike. In addition, your melee weapon attacks deal an extra 1d6 force damage on a hit. Once used, this bonus action can't be used again until the next dawn. So you can the Eldritch Claw will empower your own melee abilities, increasing their range to 30 feet, and then dealing extra force damage on a hit for 1 minute, and you activate it with a bonus action. The first part of this, in reading the tattoo, I went, yes, but also, unarmed strikes, if you're not a martial artist, aren't as awesome. They can get, better. I guess Tavern Brawler will help a little bit with that, but they're not as awesome. So then you're 1 plus your strength modifier. But then you get an additional bonus to attack and damage rolls with your unarmed strikes. If you are a monk, you're going to gain this benefit, at least in terms of overcoming immunity, as part of your level progression. But if you did this and you were still a monk, you still get the +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls. And the Eldritch Maul creates a similar situation, not the same, as the Sun Monk,
Sun Soul?
Thank you, Sun Soul.
So my answer to that is, this calls back to, from world building, who would use these tattoos. So it might be that this one is mostly appropriate for a monk. And looking back at the class feature variant UA, unarmed fighting was one of the fighting styles that you could pick for your paladin ranger fighter. Yeah, so that was one of the things that did come up, which was, can I have an unarmed character that's viable that doesn't go the monk route, the specific monk flavoring and mechanics? Can I build a battle master that relies on their fists and feet instead of a sword? So I'm curious if they built this tattoo with that class feature variant in mind. I don't know how the playtesting is going for that. But yeah, actually my gripe is it's not a mechanics one. It's just the fact that it's an Eldritch Claw. I wish it just had a different name than Eldritch. Yeah. Because Eldritch, and I guess Eldritch Knight is more of a fighter, but I equate Eldritch with Warlock, and Warlock is a very specific kind of magic. Mm-hmm. If it was even something like Arcane Claw, or just something a little bit more general, or Force Claw. So Claw. Just the name Eldritch it has a specific world implication, at least in my perspective, that I don't think is necessarily appropriate for even a monk, But who am I to say?
I agree. I think it's interesting because I've actually I've been doing a lot of small research projects lately, and I've been thinking about actually creating a Saitama build, One Punch Man build, basically. And I feel that this would be really conducive to those people who really like the idea of you're not glass cannon, because Saitama is really strong and can't really be hurt too well, but when you hit and when the right conditions are met, you punch as hard as possible and just take out one guy in one punch, and that's the whole point, right? So I just think that this would be an interesting thing to be able to add to that kind of a build, because who doesn't get excited at the thought of being able to one shot a dragon or something like that? I'm not saying that would be balanced or whatever, but just the concept really speaks to me in a way.
It already kind of exists with the open hand monk, because the open hand monk has a thing where it's did you fail your con save? You drop to 0 hit points now. So
that's right.
That's your One Punch Man. It's a really high level, but it's how much constitution do you have? Drop.
yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. The build that I was looking at, I think they calculated it. When you deal max damage or something, it's 416. So that's why I was looking at that from that perspective. But I don't play enough monks, so maybe I should start.
Yeah. Well, the thing I like about open hand, to finish that tangent, is it also, even if they succeed on the Constitution save, you get to do a Fist of the North Star kind of thing, where it's you fool, you're already dead. 10d10 necrotic damage. Like it's so even if there's a little bit of a delay, you have that ability built in.
It's a very anime moment of just going and then walking away. Like, what did you do? And they die in the background. Speaking of bloody mess, now the next one is called the Blood Fury. It is Wondrous item. It is legendary. Now, this tattoo evokes fury in its form and its colors. While the tattoo is on your skin, you gain the following benefits. Your attack rolls score a critical hit on a d20 if you roll 19 or 20. When you score a critical hit against a creature, the target takes an extra 4d6 necrotic damage, and you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to the necrotic damage dealt. And when a creature you see damages you, you basically have a counter. You can use your reaction to make a melee attack against that creature with advantage on your attack roll, upping your chance to crit. Oh boy.
Yeah, you combine that with a 20th level barbarian. And that it fits flavor wise, and it certainly fits build wise. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's actually one of the most competitive legendary magic items I think I've seen. I think you don't have a magic item yet that increases threat range. No. In 5th edition's Raw, you can only do that through
Champion.
And Hexblade's Curse does it, yes. And Oath of Conquest Paladin's Capstone. Yep. When you transform, it lets you do that.
Yeah, that's a
it's a very rare thing to see where you have a crit range that's expanded like that.
Plus the critical hit now you have. I mean, if you're a barbarian already, you're getting brutal critical. You have multiple dice on brutal critical at high level. Adding on an additional 4d6 necrotic damage on top of that without having to stack in champion is pretty amazing. Plus that in having a melee counter because you're already in the fray of something smacking you and then...
Well, and half orc gives you an additional die too. It's like you get brutal critical, but in your racial traits. Let me look up one last thing. I think there's a feat that lets you do it too. No, it's different. It's called like the same kind. It's the like half-orc thing is Savage Attacks, and there's a feat called Savage Attacker, and they do two completely different things, but they're named super similarly. Yep. But if you have Savage Attacker, you get to re-roll damage die. So if you get like a 1 on a d12, you can just re-roll it. Like it's pretty nice.
I like it. I like it a lot. After this is a common tattoo. So you have the Illuminator's tattoo. This tattoo contains beautiful calligraphy or images of writing implements or something like that. While this tattoo is on your skin, you can write with your fingertip as if it were an ink pen that never runs out of ink. As an action, you can touch a piece of writing up to 1 page in length and speak a creature's name. The writing becomes invisible to everyone other than you and the named creature for the next 24 hours. Either of you can dismiss the invisibility by touching the script, no action required. Once used, this action can't be used until the next dawn.
You have a smartphone in D&D world now.
It lets you say, okay, George, this is for George. And the message is invisible, and then George can, okay. However, this is a great cloak and dagger espionage subterfuge and a role-playing and exploration use. A lot of these so far, we've seen a lot of combat representation. This is really neat for the wizard scholar, the high-level noble, anybody who needs to pass secret messages to anyone. This is insanely cool. And I mean, imagine in a world if you had like a specific, I don't know, I think I suddenly flashed to the matrix of the key maker, but someone who is skilled in writing messages for people or, sending messages to people. How interesting would it be if they had, specific people that could only read their messages that are coded inside this spy network? So you could run across a bit of parchment, but it's only seeable by someone else in the network or something like that. It's just very intriguing to me.
I had the darker approach, which is because it lasts only for 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking our Way of Mercy murder monk, like writing it in blood on a wall and not having it appear for 24 hours, and then 24 hours hits and it reveals itself as like your time is up. And
yeah, right.
The soul knife just comes by and rends mind, and it's like the person just drops and they don't know why, because it's all psychic damage and you leave no trace. And
well, it's like the black spot for a pirate, like, but instead of it's a folded piece of paper and you open it up and it says nothing, and then at the end of 24 hours it's just your time. Yeah, I like that a lot. That's when the sniper hits.
Yeah, no, that was the dark thing. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
After this is the Life Well tattoo. It is rare. And what it really does, while this tattoo is on your skin, you have resistance to necrotic damage and can gain the benefit of a death ward, essentially. So when you would be reduced to 0 hit points, you drop to 1 hit point instead. And this is until the next dawn. Which is
have that
pretty...
on all the time.
Yeah, just have that on all the time, please. And resistance
with
to
an
necrotic damage.
artificer and a staff of power, a staff of the magi, where if you break it, it does like 300 damage to you or whatever. like just have that on all the time, where it's like, all right, last resort.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically a contingency. I would see this with a lot of even more than martial classes, any class really that knows they're going into the crap and is always there. Like what is it, the Black Staff, which is a faction class inside Grey Owls. The Black Staffs would have something like this active. I had it active in his staff, but it might be adjusted that he has the Life Well tattoo, because he knows, even as a wizard, he's going to go into the thick of it, and he might get hit so hard he dies or be pushed to 0. He needs to be able to pop back up so he can teleport his allies away.
Yeah,
or get out of there.
Oh yeah, I can see this being actually pretty common. As far it says it's rare, but I can see it being like common for certain or forces where they're put into that kind of situation that the stakes are so high that we can't afford to lose like even a single member of our group or something, of our forces. So having this be like part of, like, maybe not like the military or something, but like a squad or something, like a party, that they need this kind of protection because of the type of danger and the stakes that are at risk that they're going into. So like with night owls or something, with this the worm that walks, I'm not saying you should do this, but like I can see this being one of those kinds of equipment that it's like, if you really mess up badly, don't worry, you have the death ward. But remember, it only works one time. So it's like,
so get up and run.
Yeah, it's like a fail-safe. It's the fairy, really. It's the fairy from Legend of Zelda, except it's like a really not good fairy.
Yeah, no, actually, the only thing I have to say on this one is I actually think rare as like a category of how often you could be able to get it. I think that's kind of low. I kind of think that this should be a very rare item, because that's a very powerful ability to reset every dawn. Like if it was one of those where it was like you use it once and you can't use it for like 7 days or something, like then I would be cool with being a little more common. But the fact that it resets that often, especially since a lot of 5th edition games tend to be set piece encounter, long rest, set piece encounter, you basically end up getting it once per fight. So
I mean, a half orc will also have that
relentless endurance.
Relentless endurance every long rest as well.
Well, the difference with relentless endurance is that if you get killed outright, relentless endurance doesn't trigger. So death ward, it doesn't matter how much damage you take, death ward will absorb it. With relentless endurance, if you get dropped to 0 and not killed outright, meaning you don't take your hit point maximum in damage, then
When
yeah.
you're used to 0 hit points.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Were you looking at Death Ward, or were you looking at?
I'm looking at not specifically Death Ward, but the Death Ward of the Lifewell tattoo. It doesn't have the added script of when you would be reduced to 0 hit points, but not killed outright.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, and
it doesn't have that.
Yeah, because it's a Death Ward. You're not supposed to die.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and the spell, that's almost verbatim what the spell says too. So it's the same kind. It's a little bit more powerful than Relentless Endurance, which is why I just feel like to have it reset that often and to have any character have access to it. I agree that it would be especially powerful on a half orc, because now,
basically 2 instances where you can get back up, and one a little more powerful than the other. After this is the Ghost Step tattoo. It is rare. The tattoo has 3 charges, and it regains all expended charges daily at dawn. As a bonus action, while the tattoo is on your skin, you can expend 1 of the tattoo's charges to become incorporeal until the end of your next turn. For the duration, you gain the following benefits. You have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical attacks. You can't be grappled or restrained because because you're incorporeal. And you can move through creatures and solid objects as if they were difficult terrain. Much like other creatures who are incorporeal. If you end your turn in a solid object, you take 1d10 force damage. If the effect ends while you are inside a solid object, you are instead shunted to the nearest unoccupied space, and you take 1d10 force damage for every 5 feet traveled, just like a lot of incorporeal movement creatures. So that's neat. You get to basically turn ghost-like as you pass through the world for 6 seconds, in like segments of 6 seconds, because it goes till the end of your next turn. Which is nice, actually. So you could start it at 1 turn and then come back to your turn and continue movement in that way, and then it will end.
Yeah, and even outside of combat, I can see this one along with the writing tattoo. What was it called? The Illuminator's tattoo. I can see this being very conducive to a Cloak and Dagger campaign or even a heist, because of in combination even with Soul Knife, Rogue, who can just turn invisible whenever he wants. Like if you're out of invisibility charges, at least you can go incorporeal or something like that to get out of the building or something. So I can see this working really well for like a much slower campaign when it comes to that. Or even in a dungeon crawl, really, if you suspect that there's like space, like maybe 20 feet or something behind the wall that you're currently next to, you could just walk through it and be like, oh, I bypassed all those traps. That was nice.
Or, oh, there's a secret room over here. Or, hey, if you're incorporeal, oh, guys, don't go through this door because it's full of goblins ready to ambush you. Let me just pass back through the door here. Don't go there. It's a good way to scout, really. And I appreciate more options to be able to scout ahead, because then that allows you to circumvent certain issues that the DM may have laid out for you, and that also makes it so you can have more dynamic and interesting encounters. I like that a lot. Also, hey, you have resistance. Cool. For just a little bit, and you can't be grabbed, so you got a grabby enemy that helps too. After this is the Masquerade tattoo. This tattoo, as a bonus action, it is common, that's right. As a bonus action, you can shape the tattoo into any color or pattern and move it to any area of your skin. Whatever form it takes is always obviously a tattoo. It can range in size from no smaller than a copper piece to an intricate work of art that covers all of your skin. So, as an action, you can use the tattoo to cast Disguise Self. Once the spell is cast, it can't be cast from the tattoo again until the next dawn. So I could see this also, like say you have a secret order or like a thieves guild or something that has a certain symbol on them. You can now reform your own masquerade tattoo to make that symbol, and then you can circumvent that and infiltrate. Or if it's really complex, disguise self, just once per dawn.
I would actually, for me, if I were to implement this tattoo in my games, I would remove that restriction. Where disguise self is one of those spells that's so freaking fun, and changelings have it as a racial feat. If you can find a tattoo, you can just do it. Like, I think that people would be more willing to use it if they knew it wasn't something that would go away. So, and I think that the roleplay potential of disguise self or shape-changing abilities in general, there's so much fun. I want to, as a DM, remove as much resistance as I can to people willing to use them. So, and really, what can you do with it besides social interaction? You know, it's not like you're getting a +1 bonus to AC, so it's not like in combat it's going to break the system. It's just a cool social interaction piece. And social interaction, this is how you make in-depth role-playing, is through options like this, you know?
Yeah, and I can also see, you mentioned changelings, I can also see this in your world being like the result of having studied changelings and their traits, and then trying to come up with like some way to be able to imbue that kind of power in other people, in normal people. Even actually, if we're talking about like role play and stuff, using it as entertainment value as well. So you could have actors who are really good at acting, but like this character is like a tiefling, and you don't want to just paint yourself to be a tiefling or something. So it's like you could just use the disguise self tattoo, especially considering that it's common. So
yeah,
I wonder also like how interesting would it be if you had, you know, a theater troupe who is say that maybe you're in a kingdom where they don't like the king, and the theater troupe depicts the king in a theater production, but it's like an over exaggerated form of the king because they're using disguise self, or maybe they make it look exactly like him, but he gets a pie in the face.
Yeah.
And you know, how much trouble would they then be in? You know, you got the pirate radio of the theater guild that's like, aha, we stick it to the man because we can do that.
Well, and actually, also, what could they get away with? Because, you know, one of the things with actors is you can always kind of tell who the actor is under the makeup or the disguise, but because you're fundamentally changing how you appear, like maybe it's like they go by a pen name or a pseudonym, you know? Yeah. So it's not that you don't know first name, last name. You just know them by their acting identity. And that really, that creates like another faction. To let you know, Ian, the lore that you just like pulled from, that is a spell gem I have under the utility spell gems in that document, and that's one of the things it specifically calls out is theaters and actors. So it's definitely a relevant component to the game I want to run next.
Awesome.
After this is a varied rarity, a spell wrought tattoo. This tattoo contains a single spell of up to 5th level. Hey, this is what I was doing before, but it's going to be different. Wrought on your skin by a magic needle. To use the tattoo, you must hold the needle against your skin where you want the tattoo to appear and speak the command word. The needle turns into the ink that becomes the tattoo, which appears on your skin. Once the tattoo is on your skin, you can cast its spell, requiring no material components. The tattoo glows faintly while you cast the spell, and for the spell's duration. Once the spell ends, the tattoo vanishes from your skin.
Oh.
The level of the spell in the tattoo determines the spell's saving throw DC, attack bonus, spellcasting ability modifier, and the tattoo's rarity, as shown in the table. So if you have like a cantrip or a first level spell, it is common. It has a +3 modifier, a spell save DC of 13, attack bonus of +5. Second level is the same there. Third level and fourth and fifth, they start to increase and the save DC goes up. So this is essentially what I was trying to do. And it was always difficult to try and then calculate. I had to create a very generalized calculation of this is the ability modifier, this is the spell save DC, and it has to be general because it's based on the ink artist, not you as a spellcaster. But it's the same idea that there's like a burn that's almost left on you. And if you use this too much in Grey Owls, if you have like a spell scroll use of your body, you'll start to develop like burns of the magic, the raw arcana, like flying from your body.
This is a little bit of a darker example. Could you develop something like a kind of cancer where it's like
Yes.
there, because you're exposed to basically magical radiation, not only burn, but like some sort of warp to your body's genetic code.
Yeah.
Like,
in book 2, we might see more of that in the world, of like examples of people who have used a lot of spell scrolls on their skin.
That's actually really interesting to look at world building through ramification and consequence. Because if you think to our real world, like think about when we tested the nuclear bomb, and basically afterward, everyone got so excited, they like ran right to the site, and they're like, wow, we're standing in the middle of where it detonated. And then all those people, unfortunately, they develop these serious ailments from that. So it's really interesting to see, the consequence may not be immediate, and there is a consequence,
Yeah, and that's actually interesting because there's a similar concept in this anime that I watched a little while back called Fire Force, where there are people born with the ability to manipulate fire, and there's like different degrees of like skill level and things like that. But there was the idea that just like anything else, there's a limited amount of usage that you can get out of this ability. So when you try to push yourself past those limits without like any caution that you would take, you actually start to develop, I don't remember what they called it. It was some sort of burn where the fire within you that you control becomes out of control, and it begins to burn away your skin and turn you to ash basically over a long period of time. And it only gets worse if you try to use your abilities more. So like at that point, like you're done. Like unless you don't care about dying, if you're in dire straits or whatever, then like there's no way you can continue to use that ability. So it's very interesting how this might turn out in Grey Owls. I'll be very interested to see how that goes.
Oh yeah. I like having consequential afflictions, but they're not so terrible that a player wouldn't try to do this. Like there's a certain threshold you can stay under and you'll be okay. It's just the idea of, if you have people who are dependent upon this way of using magic, that you're going to start having a taxation upon your body because they're using it so much. And there's the same thing with Ashers and Strains. It was a way to get magic to the lower populace because magic was built for the rich. So they have all these other ways of getting magic, kind of black market sort of scenario. But if you have more of that, there's a toxicity, there's dependency, there's risk to consuming these things that might go poorly. But also when things are so hard, sometimes for some people, that's the only option that they have, or they feel that that's the only option that they have. And it's just really interesting to create that sort of risk reward. And this, I like a more standardized way to just see it very clearly. This is what it would look like. And I'm happy to adopt that. And then in Grey Owls, there are 6th and 7th and 8th and 9th level spells that have that, but you need to seek them out. It's not a common marketplace thing that you could just say, I want this foresight tattoo. You got to find the one guy, the one gal that knows how to do a foresight tattoo.
Yeah.
Which is, again, more options, more exploration options.
Well, and it's cool too, because like I can call back to. Did you guys ever watch Outlaw Star from the 90s? Where there was a banned episode just because it had nudity and stuff in it. But basically, Gene Starwin's weapon was a caster gun. He could fire spells from his gun, and there was an entire episode dedicated to him seeking out these hermits that were the last people that could make these like ridiculously powerful caster shells, and he had 4 of them. So he had to like use them. He had to really save them for a time that he needed them.
Yeah, Outlaw Star is such a cool anime.
Yeah.
After this, we have our last tattoo of the document. It's called the Shadowfell Brand. It is very rare. While it's on your skin, you have advantage on stealth checks. Also, you have a shadowy defense. When you take damage, you can use your reaction to become shadowy and insubstantial for a moment, reducing the damage you take by half. So uncanny dodge. Once used, this reaction can't be used again until the next dawn. So good for a spy and anybody that's just like, I don't want to take quite as much damage this turn. If they are non-rogues, this would be something I would also see if there was like a knight police force. I'm looking at some of my notes for book 2 and how there are certain police groups. There's always 2 in each city. We have like the standard cops and then like the FBI or like the individual agents that would walk around. And depending on group, I could see like one of those other groups having this kind of idea. Just they sneak around. They are the spies of the city, and they're the ones you hire to take care of things, or they're the ones run by the government, so they investigate. But they should be able to get in and out quickly. It is very rare, and there's something about that I'm, based on what you get, I'm not so sure about.
Yeah, no, I would definitely, it's kind of funny. Like, I would pop up Death Ward, and I would take down the Shadowfell one. I wonder if it's because it's flavored as a Shadowfell tattoo. So in their heads, it was like you have to go to the Shadowfell to get it inscribed, which makes it more rare because it's harder to travel like that. But no, I definitely agree that for what you get, the rarity doesn't match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should be uncommon.
I would say
maybe rare.
Because Boots' Cloak of Elvenkind gives you advantage on stealth checks, and that's it, and that's uncommon. So because it's like Cloak of Elvenkind, but up a little bit, pop it up to rare.
Pop it up to rare.
Yeah.
I can see that.
This is interesting because I have in my Blood in the Valley mini campaign, I have a magic item, a custom magic item that I did that basically does this except without the advantage on stealth. And I think it's interesting that they're flavoring it as a Shadowfell tattoo, because to me, just the name itself, without looking at what it does, the name itself implies that you've like somehow established a connection with the Shadowfell. And because it's a brand, I'm not sure, do they mean like trademark, or do they mean like you've been branded?
You've been
branded.
So like
I think
the
it's
latter,
branded, because earlier in the document they said that, we flavored this as tattoos, but this could be you've been branded or you've been scarred, or it's a birthmark, which calls back to like dragon marks from Eberron.
Yeah.
But I could definitely see it as being one of those things that a shadow monk uses, like to not have to invest in rogue that much, but you still get a lot of the benefits of being a rogue, while still having that kind of like monk progression.
Yeah. And because you're branded, because you've been marked with this, like, does that mean that somehow like you've got one foot in the grave kind of moment, you're one foot in the Shadowfell, and you could be like pulled into the Shadowfell depending on how much you use this tattoo. Or maybe that maybe you've escaped the Shadowfell, like maybe because the Shadowfell could be like they have prisons, of course, in the Shadowfell, and souls, because the Raven Queen just loves that kind of thing. She's like, I'll take that one, and I'll take that one. And then maybe somehow you've escaped, but through escaping, you've been branded. Or better yet, because you were pulled into the Shadowfell originally, you were branded because it's like, you're mine now. And then you get out, and this is what it does on the outside. Right. Shadowfell, maybe it's just a number, so it would just be, I mean, that gets a little bit darker there, but just these tattoos, like, do they all work the same on each plane of existence? There's all sorts of things you could really start to look into when it comes to this kind of magic, and I like that.
That's fascinating to have it function differently depending on which plane of existence that you're on.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, that would be up to you. You can always go with the raw, but I think when you're creating a custom world, which is something I'm looking into, this is the kind of stuff that really gets me excited.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I'm jotting down a couple notes about That's in particular. And when I look at like my whole list of the rest of my tattoos, I know they started to warp away from the one-to-one spell to spell kind of idea. There are a couple that are connected. It seemed to be, at least flavor-wise, connected to some of the other planes of existence. And especially in Grails, where many things are broken, we know that the Shadowfell is destroyed. It doesn't exist anymore. So if this brand were to exist in this exact flavor, would it also be somehow warped because it's not connected? Or it is connected, but it's connected to something that doesn't exist? And how could that inform your own world building? To just, how would that work? And kind of ponder about that is really, really exciting to me. I really like these. I think they're legal for use in my games, but it's going to be something that the players need to seek out. In the case of Night Owls, it's something that people could choose to use with their treasure points because of the nature of how Night Owls functions. In Grey Owls, it's something we would have to seek out, but there would be artists available inside the world. If it's something that is active in the world, then it'll be referenced and we all can access it. Final thoughts on tattoos?
I like them. I think that they're a great addition to the magic item armory of 5th edition. I think that I didn't see anything here where I thought it was too unbalanced. I did think that there were some things that were a little less powerful, a little bit more powerful, but nothing that offended me. And I do like the idea of them being reflavored as separate things, like maybe an amulet or a trinket. Yeah. Or as a tattoo or a birthmark. I think there's a lot of cool things that you can do with these to establish your character's identity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. I think mostly, of course, there's always combat applications for these, but I think for the most part, this is going to enhance your role-playing ability and what you're looking for as you level up and progress as a character. And I really do like with the psionics and stuff, I like how they're incorporating new ways of thinking and new ways of looking at what magic really is, and if there's a difference between how we see magic and how it actually functions, or, in the case of psionics, it's psionic, not really magic, but it's also magic, and it's like, as far as like world building goes, this is really exciting because you could have maybe a country or a society where tattoos are really common and it's very cultural, whereas the other societies don't. Just like here in the real world, and bringing that level of realism actually expands the depth of your own custom world. So I'm really excited about that. That'll be cool.
Speaking of custom worlds and custom items, do we have?
Go ahead, Ian.
Do we have time? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm doing a mini campaign called officially now Blood in the Valley, and it's a precursor to the Curse of Strahd campaign, essentially. And this campaign has given me a lot of experience as a DM and has made me feel just really excited about creating new worlds and putting my own ideas into the normal raw. So one of those things has manifested as custom magic items. So one of my characters, one of the players actually has a magic item, for example, that's a necklace, and it's a special Vistani necklace that is imbued with the ability to, as a reaction, take half damage of whatever you want, like once per day, which was the bit that I was saying before. And there's another magic item that I really put a little bit of time into here called the Pyramid of Light. And basically, you can't just have one. You need to have 3 or more. And it's like a crystalline pyramid, like a charm or an amulet. And as a reaction, those who hold the pyramid must be within 60 feet to do it. And they hold up the pyramid, and it activates essentially like a wall of light cage that like forms into a triangular figure or a pyramidal figure. And inside that area of effect, there's basically a sunburst moment where you get like 5d6 radiant damage and blinded if you fail the con save. And so basically this was supposed to serve as a tool to create a more dynamic kind of final battle. But it's also it's really interesting to me because it shows that it shows a level of teamwork and coordination that is necessary sometimes to achieve a really good, battle moment or really take out the enemy. And this was inspired by me trying one time by accident to use both Wall of Force and Wall of Light at the same time on the same turn without remembering that both require concentration. So this magic item does require concentration, but it's only concentration to maintain the Wall of Light that originates from your pyramid. I have a description I can send you, Adam, later, but essentially my shower thought is, what custom magic items have you guys used, and what do you take into consideration when you're making a custom magic item, besides balance,
Yeah. So, first of all, just to stay on your train of thought for a second on the Pyramid of Light. First of all, it's funny because that was the Yu-Gi-Oh movie. It made me feel...
Yeah, it was. I knew it was too, and I was like, maybe nobody will notice.
No, I definitely noticed, and it was 100% I was about it. But, like, the thing I loved about your implementation of that magic item, as someone in the combat, is it made me remember that enemies can have a plan. So basically, to like set the scene a little, what happened is we came upon these two hags. We knew there were three hags, but two hags basically like, we sacrifice souls for our evil plan. So as the party, of course, we're like, oh, let's stop them. So we go into the windmill to fight them. And we really have great lockdown spells. We have great strategies and tactics. And the hags start going invisible. And we're like, oh, they must be cowards, or they're trying to reposition. And of course they are. They reposition as a triangle. And then Ian's like, they each take out a magic item. And I'm like, oh, we're in the middle of the of the triangle of death, the Bermuda Triangle here. And it was just cool because I could see from a DM's perspective, having fallen for the trap, how beautifully he set it up. Like, it's like, of course the players are going to rush in to try to fight the hags. Of course the hags are going to try to get them into one place where they can set up an AoE that that kind of squishes them in the middle. And it was just one of those things where it was timed perfectly, where it was like, oh man, and the magic item wasn't broken or anything. It was like super cool how conditional it was, and just how easily we fell for the conditions of it. It was, I really kind of loved that part of that encounter, because that was a cool encounter, because there was more than one enemy and they planned and coordinated with each other. And it really exemplified like a party versus party encounter, as opposed to a party versus one big bad guy with a bunch of resistances encounter.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I'm really glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to that for a long time, to be honest. As soon as that Night Owls happened, where I was like, oh, I couldn't do that. That's right. But maybe I could do it with somebody else. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. People can work together. And it was really cool because it not only did it do like damage and blinded a few people, but it also works as a zoning tactic, because they can't, the walls can be dispelled. Let's just start off with that. You can totally dispel the walls of light, but that takes your action. So the rest of the walls of light stay up, even if you dispel one. And that means you can't see anybody outside the walls of light. You can't see what they might be doing, even though on the board, I was moving tokens and everybody could see that. But realistically, you can't see through walls of light. So you have to dispel them or go around them. And the hags chose to maintain the walls of light as a zoning tool for the other big bad guy who was in the area, so that he could basically kind of take pot shots a little bit and fall back if he needed to, which ultimately he did. I was amazed how quickly the tides kind of turned in that battle, where the walls of light got set up, and people are just like, I'm blind now. Where am I? Because they're all inside the windmill. So
yeah,
I was just so excited to do that. It was so cool.
Well, one of the most satisfying encounters in the first season of Night Owls, when we were still establishing, like, how does the game work and all this, was the party went into a city and they met up with other members of the Night Owls. They teamed up essentially to go figure something out, and they dealt with a very short encounter and figured out what to do, and then they stayed in that person's like home in this city, and then woke up to find it on fire. And they had this other team were a bunch of turncoats, and they had left the city on fire. Like, they had sabotaged this whole thing, and the group had to chase them down, and they had a big fight on a bridge. And it was really cool, really satisfying, very creative ways of them getting to the bridge and seeing the traitors running on the bridge. So they had also the ability to knock people off the bridge, but this other team is another balanced party. So I had 5 people to manage who all had tactics. They've played with each other for a long time. They have, like team attacks. They have strategies that they can go toward, and they can, I use this aura and this helps my rogue do this. And they were very good about helping each other. And it was the players told me afterward, that was a really satisfying, cool fight, but also we had to keep pivoting. And that made it very satisfying. So it was very dynamic. There was a lot of moments where it would change. It wouldn't just turn and then we just beat them. There was an ebb and flow to it because they were fighting against another party, and that party had a plan. And it was a lot to manage early on for me. Just trying to be like, this is hold to the plan, guys. Don't give in to me as the human being giving up and being like, no, they need to run. Like, no, they know this is a good plan and has worked before. They have to stay the course. But I think that speaks a lot to our tactics. And even when we handle non-player, like non-characters with levels, but monsters, the next level is thinking about what would their strategies be? How would they circumvent a party of adventurers running in and trying to stop them? They wouldn't just sit there and wait for someone to attack them, right? They would have a plan. How come they've been here so long? If you have like old beings or adult dragons, how would an adult dragon deal with? How would an ancient dragon deal with adventurers? They must have strategies. They must have a playbook that's worked in the past. What have they done? And in opening that door, you create a lot more opportunities where the DM gets to play too. And it isn't just, this is a goblin. If you have an army of goblins and they're an army and they have a hobgoblin captain, has the captain given them strategies like tactics? Do they have certain formations, like a military formation? And how does that up the level of play? It doesn't make them superpowered, but it changes things. And it could be that they could set up a trap. And the players could fall into it, especially if you as the DM are noticing they rush into battle. It doesn't mean you have to like trick them, but it does mean there's a tendency here that we're observing. And in them circumventing this new problem, they will grow also. It's a cool thing to play.
Sometimes fast than others. I do have 2 things on that train of thought. The first is one of the benefits to Roll20 that I really, really like, that you can't do on the mat, like when you're in person, is change the layer that your tokens are on. So, like, for example, Ian, you said, like, oh, the players could see where my NPC was, even though their characters couldn't. I've done that before where I just change, can the players' characters see it? No, I bring it to the GM layer so that I can see where it is and I can make sure I'm following the rules of movement fairly. But it's like, you guys have both been in games where I've done that, where it's like, this creature hides underwater. So what I do is I click it to the GM layer so that that way the players understand we don't know where he is. What do we do about it?
I forgot about that.
That's okay. Well, and it's just, it was more like I enjoy the fact that Roll20 can do that. and that you can set things up in advance.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of tactics, like Adam was saying, one of the videos I watched recently that really revolutionized how I prep encounters was Matt Colville's action-oriented monsters or action-oriented creatures. The idea being that sometimes you want to set up an interesting encounter where you have a counterparty, but do you need to create 5 full character sheets and try to manage 5 full other characters as the DM? That can be overwhelming and provide a lot of slowdown. Mm-hmm. So like if I run a Lich, if you look at the Lich set, there's so many spells that they have prepped. What are going to be the ones thinking ahead that they would most likely use first? So that way, instead of having 20 spells on hand, maybe you start with like 3 or 4 that you know they're going to use pretty consistently. And then that also gives you the room of like, you're observing the battle mid-combat. What other spells might they have had? So, you can pull a little DMBS there where it's like, now I'm going to use Crown of Madness because I think that's a cool spell and I never see it used. But it's not something you like prepped ahead of time. It gives you the room to be like, what's another spell that might be fun right now? So I think that not only can you think through the tactics of what this creature would do or what's worked for them, you can eliminate a lot of the fat that you might over prep that would actually slow down the game. Yeah. And because of that, it actually gives you the room as the DM to set up an even more interesting encounter, because it's like, oh, maybe their initial plan doesn't work out too well. What's a backup plan that they had, And
the best
what might be an interesting thing to call on.
Yeah. The best sort of prep that I've seen in Roll20, especially for this, is I'll build up little stacks of macros. So each, like the big bad will have a stack of macros that I can just switch in. So I have little buttons that I can click that'll do the thing that I had pre-prepped. But even without Roll20, I'll have like a hot list of these are the main actions that they'll probably go to. Oh, yeah. the party's at range. Okay, they'll use this range attack. These are the rolls that I need to do, and this is the damage. And okay, if there are certain abilities that they can spam, like having a bugbear that can do reckless all the time. Like, of course he has reckless, so he just uses reckless, which also has the added benefit for the players that now they have advantage on him. But one of his traits is he's reckless. So I know automatically those elements are going to be in play all the time, or just consistently in the group. But I have his 3 main options, and if he's below half his hit points, he adds this 4th option. And I can create little tracks of very quick references where I don't have to go through even the monster card. Or the monster manual. I can just have those 4 things: AC, HP, okay, and this triggers if this. And it's almost like a program. Just there it is.
Yeah.
But by doing that, I've prepped for myself all of their options so I can have efficient turns, which also I think might help model for the players to help have efficient turns.
Right.
And the more turns we get to have, the more we're all playing and the more fun we're having.
Yeah, and I also don't necessarily, the one thing with the action-oriented videos that I realized you can prep in that way, but you don't really have to because you're the DM, is you don't have to have a labeled action for everything. Like, you don't need to follow the same rules the players do because you're the DM. And that sounds kind of weird, but it's like you don't have to declare he's doing this as a bonus action. He's doing this as a regular action. Like, you can just be like, his thing is he does 2 attacks and then casts a spell, or that he casted a bigger spell this round so he doesn't get his 2 attacks. Like, you don't need to. The reason why there's an action economy for players is to make sure that the players are having a balanced amount of screen time in relation to the other players at the table. That you're not having one player try to do too much and basically take up 20, 30 minutes of themselves and not give other people time to play. That's why there's an action economy for them. But as a DM, if you try to I found if you try to stick to a hardcore action economy, it makes fights predictable and boring. And that if you can switch it up by being like, well, he's got 2 reactions, or not that one specifically, but like, you know what I mean? Where like, if you can just declare I get 2 attacks and a spell. Like that is how I've balanced this out to make an interesting encounter. That you can almost give yourself a little more freedom in that way, rather than having to feel like you're constrained to the same economy that players are.
Yeah, and I mean, like with my custom monsters, well, for one thing, I just wanted to say that this discussion makes me think that it's important to remember that monsters and enemies are smart, prepared, and actionable.
Yeah.
Which is what we're talking about here. And I just wanted to summarize that in that statement. But the only time where I actually have declared, unless I'm just, not paying attention to myself, the only time I've declared that it's like an action or a reaction or something like that is when the players call into question something. So, like, for example, I have a monster that actually has 3 reactions. And it can use its reaction to move like half its speed or something when somebody else moves that it can see. So one of my players, when I did it the second time, one of my players was like, "Oh wait, but it just used its reaction. Like it can't do it again." And it's like, "Oh well, actually, it has like 3 reactions." And it's just something to keep in mind that it doesn't always like break immersion or anything, and you can declare it, but like I can see what you're saying, that it actually sounds a lot more interesting when you just say, as you move, you notice that the monster also moves like in a different direction and like catches up with you really quick to like prevent you from getting closer and therefore occupying your battle space. So it would provoke opportunity attack and other things. So yeah.
Well, and it's interesting too because your creature didn't just have a bunch of reactions. It had like specific reactions. Like it can use this reaction up to 3 times. It wasn't just it gets 3 reactions. Yeah. So like Mariliths are like that too. Mariliths have the reactive trait, but they can only use their reaction to make a melee attack. Like they can't, it's not like they can just shield and then counterspell and then shield again, Like it's like it's like a specific, so that is the one good clarification is I would say it uses its reaction to signal to the players that it's used its reaction. You've seen it use its reaction. In gameplay terms, that means now you don't have to be worried about it using another reaction unless it opens up a surprise. And that's where you can clarify it can use another reaction, but for just this thing, So when it comes to making magic items, the first thing I ask is who's going to be using it. So in terms of like, is this a player thing, a monster thing, or a monster thing that the players are going to loot off the body? Like who's going to be using it? And that helps kind of determine the level of power. Like sometimes I have it be that a monster has a magic item, but if you kill the monster, the magic item dies with the monster. So basically that frees me up to basically do whatever I want with it. Sometimes it's like, if I know the players are going to do it, I really have to think through how that's going to change the power level of the players. Big mistake I made early on was giving 2 powerful magic items too frequently. So like, there was like one where I think she was like level 7 and I gave her Defender. Because I just flipped through the book and I said, that one looks interesting. And I didn't like consider that now she could take on way too much, So that's part of it. A lot of times when I make a custom magic item, it's a slight revision. So instead of a flame tongue, it's that, but 2d6 cold damage or 2d6 lightning damage. The big thing that for me personally I've been really experimenting with is the spell gem system, where you basically get to craft your own magic items by using the effects of magic items that are laid out in the Dungeon Master's Guide. So do you need to be able to deal a little more fire damage or acid damage or something? There's like a category of spell gem for that. Do you need utility? There's another category for that. So that way the players basically have effects that they can play with that have been established, but it doesn't have to be flavored in the specific way the Dungeon Master's Guide kind of lays it out. The other thing I like really doing is introducing sentience to a magic item, especially if it doesn't seem like the sentience is there at the beginning. Like, it's like randomly, it's like all of a sudden you notice your bow starts talking to you. Do you decide to listen? I think that the most interesting magic items I've ever had were ones where it became part of the character's identity and story through a conversation. And it doesn't necessarily have to be legendary to be sentient. I just find that adding sentience to a magic item just is a narrative gateway for further role-playing exploration.
That's why I like the spark sword for Solomon now.
Oh, the Spark of Life Daybreaker. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I ran into a interesting habit early on when running games at Questor's Way, which was I would award too many items too often. As like a way to reward my players. But then the first few campaigns, so the Pirates campaign, got way too many things. So they were doing a bunch of pirating or like looting, and they would find all these cool things and then steal them, and then never sell them. They always have them on hand because they were very industrial players and were looking for opportunities to utilize all of those resources. And then after a while, they had way too many resources. So it was like, you can just do everything now. And there's no challenge anymore. I have to really, really think outside the box in order to even make this difficult, even make it a mild challenge. So in scaling all of that back, what I'll do when I try and think about making a magic item, there's a connected reasoning to the world. And that helps me also craft, like, why would this exist? Who made it? Was it manufactured? Was it found? Was it discovered? Are there a limited amount? Are there a ton of these? Does it have a connection and a history? And by doing that, it also creates a grounding for me. So in a way, I'm not taking the Dungeon Master's Guide and going, what magical item do you find? Anymore. I used to do that. And that's also where, for me personally, that ran me into the trouble of, well, you have this and this and this and this now. Oops. You're almost too powerful now. I gave them all those magic items. What was I thinking, DM brain? And now by scaling back, there's a rarity to the things they get, which makes them exponentially more powerful. So I referenced the Shadowfell campaign. They found a number of small, like minute magical items or somewhat uncommon items, but they themselves won't use them, so they sell them. And then they pool that money to get one silvered weapon. Why? Because they're dealing with specters and ghosts, and they need weapons that can deal the right amount of damage to them. And it makes that one silvered weapon exponentially more rewarding than giving them a whole bunch of cloaks or a whole bunch of boots and different things. So when I give them things, I'm very careful about only giving them this one thing. Or if I give them an abundance, there are often things that they wouldn't probably use or would have to be kind of creative about using them. But the way that campaign is working, they're taking them and going, oh, this is this kind of rarity. We won't use it, but it's going to sell really well, so we can get something really great later. So it's almost like an extra step toward further satisfaction in purchasing something. So they've been to the shop and gone, oh, that's outside of our price range. But if we sell him this item, that might open the door to allow us to get this thing that we want, this thing that's going to function better inside the world and make us more efficient adventurers. And when I'm making a certain item, I'll look at what the party is lacking and how I could not necessarily solve all their problems, but how can I help ease some of that in a functional and narrative way that has a logical reasoning. So in this case, like, they're fighting undead and they're dealing with mundane weapons and they're dealing half damage, and that stinks. Wouldn't it be great? Okay, we need something to be silvered. We need something to overcome their resistance. So automatically they'll now seek out, and they've experienced having a weapon they borrowed that does that, and they had to give it back. So now they can go, okay, that was functional. We need to get ourselves one of those. And it creates a next thing that they're building up their resources, but they're not going, everyone needs a magical item and we all need to be awesome. It's how do we solve this one problem of their damage resistance? Okay, how do we solve this next problem of, someone gets possessed? Is there an item we can get that'll stop them from being possessed or have a protection against that? Because that's a problem in the world. And in doing it that way, I've sort of switched my whole pursuit about magic items. It's less of a reward to them that, oh, you found this thing. That still happens, but it's not my only go-to. And for some of the campaigns, it's what do they need and what's a consistent problem? So there would be a consistent item that they can go get or purchase. And hey, if they find a dead adventurer that has a silver dagger, take the silver dagger because it's going to be exponentially more powerful than something else. And because that particular campaign has a lower amount of magical items, I told them up front, you're not going to get a lot out of the gate, and you're going to have to kind of fight to get the things you get. That makes that rarity so much more powerful. So when they make something custom that fulfills a certain purpose, like the resistance to possession, there's a greater sense of satisfaction on that. And then I like having reflavors of items. That's a standard thing that we can do. But for me personally, that's kind of where I am. I would reward too much too quickly. And I would give them too many bonuses from all my Pathfinder background. And then I'd break 5e. And, I'd give them so much because, yay, thank you for playing my game with me. Here's all this stuff. But in doing that, it's sort of overcomplicated. So for me, I'm in this current space where I've scaled back tremendously. And then on the other flip side is making custom, like homebrew magical items that have existence in the world. That's where it comes down to, again, that connective tissue. There's a world building reason why this would exist. And I've gone through a bit more comprehensive reasoning to connect that so that everyone can I hate that feeling of, why is this even here? Like, you just pull a legendary sword out of this one spot. Why was it there? Oh, well, now I've got this cool legendary blade. Whereas I really like, if you pull that legendary blade out, why was it there? Who had it? What sort of thing, what sort of narrative through line was there? Who was that person that had it? What were they doing? And that can create all these great branching opportunities that can also justify having this really powerful thing because there's a story behind it. It isn't a random object that the players now have that's super powered. It can still have all those qualities, but now there's connective tissue inside the world. And those are the things that I've been thinking the most about. Not as much the mechanics, but how can this have connective tissue so that just the existence of any item will automatically be more rewarding because it's connected and there's a story around it. That was a long way of saying those things.
Yeah. Actually listening to your philosophy there, it made me ask a very important question, which I think every DM needs to consider, which is, what is rewarding for your players? So like you were saying, one of the issues was giving too many magic items to the point that now there's an abundance and each magic item isn't as valuable on its own, So sometimes like I've been thinking about that. Is the reward like getting gold? Because that's also another one that comes up is, gold almost sometimes feels worthless because you have so much of it and you have nothing to spend on. Why create a gold sink when that may not be a good reward? Gold or earning money should be a thing that helps you survive, but that never is something accounted for in 5th edition. So sometimes reward could be pursuing a story. Like Night Owls is one of the most rewarding like campaigns right now because it's not because we get magic items or we get levels. It's because we're pursuing a story and we're getting information is the reward, And they talk about that in video game design where sometimes your reward is the cutscene or it's furthering the story. It's not like there's stuff, Sometimes the reward is more intrinsic than that. And then, so this also leads me to, and this is a mechanical side of what you were saying with like connecting it to the world, which is when you design a magic item, are you offering a more interesting choice, or are you just giving them more of something? So one of the things that I felt unsatisfied with like just a +1 weapon or a +2 weapon is that fighters like aren't effective unless you give them a magic weapon. They can't do their job unless you give them equipment. And then you allow for them to be effective, you know, versus like Daybreaker is a good example of a magic weapon that offers an interesting choice. You have 10 charges. If you use a charge, it does 2d8 extra radiant damage, you know? So like that's an interesting choice. Do I attack magically, or do I hold off on the magic to attack normally? So that way, you know, you value the item, but it's giving you a choice, and it gives you a decision point instead of just, do we use the silver sword or the sword that doesn't work? You know, there's not a good bad choice. There's a risk reward choice. And I think that in magic item design, creating a risk reward of there's charges or a resource you spend to make it work, I think that's more interesting than good bad. And then the last thing is, how can you upgrade your magic items? I think that especially at the end of the first Thursday campaign, that was a cool alternative where we have all these magic items. We can only choose to attune to 3 of them. Can we like combine their powers so that you have 2 different cloaks? Can they become 1 cloak? Can you take this sword that's like a flame tongue but give it a +1 in addition to its flame tongue property? I think that magic items, if you can connect it to the world, if you can give it a story, you can let a magic item become integral to a character's identity, but then you offer them ways to upgrade that magic item. So instead of giving them a new thing as a reward that they may not use because it doesn't fit their character, you can allow them to upgrade what they already have. And I think that when you're coming to how do you reward your players, letting them upgrade what they've already made a choice with in character creation from starting equipment, that can be kind of its own reward. Where like, how often do we have magic flails, you know, like, or like how often do we have magic pikes or magic tridents? You know, there might be 1 or 2, but giving a player a reward of, instead of you get more things, you get more out of your thing, you know? So I think that's where my magic item rule set comes from, is less about the story and more about the experience, which story can be part of the experience, but not sacrificing the experience for the story.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find like this taking someone's short sword and then them silvering it.
Yeah.
They still have their short sword, but now their short sword is better. And they could be able to like take that blade and change it in another way in the future. Yeah. And then it's still their sword, but now it can do something else. And I like that.
And it's interesting because if you read what I had in my Garrus document, you can silver a weapon, but the risk reward is that weapon can break more easily. So it can accrue penalty if you nat 1 and you hit it against a surface. Silver is a softer metal than steel. It's why we don't fight with silver weapons, because it's expensive to fix, right? So it might be now they have to have 1 short sword that's silver for when we fight ghosts, and 1 short sword that's not silver for when we fight zombies, because I don't want to risk damaging my sword. I want to save it for when it's going to be appropriate. So again, even in an item like that, you can create a risk reward structure where, you know, are you going to risk your item damaged and now you can't use it as often when you need it? Or are you going to, so how do you tell that through the story of the item? And does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I believe you even mentioned that, Adam, where like in the golem fight, they went to use a silvered weapon and they rolled a nat 1 and the silvered weapon broke against the golem. So like it's something that's kind of built in already, but yeah.
Yeah. It means, you know, how do we get the best material? But I like having different. They're learning, especially in the Shadowfell, they're learning that they can be monster hunters, and there are certain monsters that are going to react certain ways to different materials.
Yep.
So two of them are specifically like they're brothers, and they work together to hunt things and track things. So I'm trying to feed them more and more knowledge about that through the world. That has connected through lines. So if they go, oh, we need holy water for this particular creature, let's stock up on holy water because we're going to be hunting that thing.
Yeah. Well, and I like the idea of having an ultimate material because maybe the risk reward isn't when you use the material, it's finding it. So it's like you have like 3 days to find one and you only have time to get one out of these 3 materials. Which material are you going to allocate your time for to get so that way it's going to be the one that you ultimately go with, you know?
And you could even make it like a story. So like Star Steel is a common metal that, not common, but like it's a metal that you guys have, mutually in your respective worlds, I'm pretty sure. And to me, that speaks of like meteorites and stuff. So if Star Steel is like the best, the best metal to make swords out of, that means there's going to be high competition too when you're going to find these things. So maybe it's not just you looking for it. Maybe everybody's looking for it. So if an asteroid or a meteor comes to the Earth or something, there's going to be a race really to go and see who can get there first, because that person has scavenging rights or whatever it's called. I think it's called that. Basically, they get to take it because they got there first. Finders keepers. So, it's not like you're not limited to just which one you're choosing to go and get. You're also limited by what everybody else is doing when you're trying to get there. So I actually think that would be really cool.
And to cycle things back very briefly to consequences, like I remember in Io Ren, which was like just regular freaking D&D for the world of Io, there was a point in Thursday's campaign that I think it was not Sullivan, Orphan, was like, hey, let's go get some adamantine, and like, yeah, you have to go hunt the adamantoise, the dead shells of the adamantoise, and there are so many adventurers that did that. So there was an abundance of sculpted adamantine in the 4th age, but by the 5th age, it was so rare because they'd used it all and the adamantoise didn't recover in their population. So by the time we get to the 6th age, adamantine is so rare that it's extremely expensive. Yeah, well, that's why
I feel like we have like 4 adamantine weapons by like level 4.
You did, because you took it off of the armor of the big jerk robot, guy, the big robot. But he was the only thing that was adamantine so far in the campaign, and he remains the only thing pretty much. It's only the high-powered nobles that have access to any sort of adamantine right now, or it's like an alloy of adamantine. But anyway, it's cool to take a look at why would this be rare. And it's why when we look at the DMG and it's like, oh, adamantine's uncommon. In Io, it's very rare or legendary.
Yeah.
Why? And then we get to figure out why.
Yeah. All right. Just to summarize,
that answered any of your questions.
So step 1, figure out the story of your magic item. Step 2, how does it relate to the characters? Because you can have a really interesting story, but it doesn't have anything. Players don't care about it. Step 3, how do you craft a dynamic experience with some kind of risk-reward structure, whether that's within the use of the magic item's mechanics or if it has story implications. Because like you said, Adam, like there was like a whole thing on displacer beasts also, I think in the 5th or 6th age, where it's like displacer beasts you could use their hide to make a magic item. Are you going to risk the displacer beast population in order to harvest this rare material? Like maybe the risk reward isn't in its mechanics, maybe it's in the story consequences of the world, or some kind of combination of them. So yeah, no, that's an excellent kind. Does that summarize? Because that seems like to summarize everything we've been talking about.
Yeah,
story,
absolutely.
Character, experience.
Yeah, I think that works really well, and this has actually given me a lot of brainstorming material to work with for some of my campaigns. So this is going to be cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that's where we can wrap it up. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to today's episode of the DM Shower Thoughts. You can find DM Shower Thoughts over on YouTube, where our industrious John puts out videos every Sunday. And then I have my blog posts over at the GM's Corner most Saturdays and Tuesdays over at AdamusStrikeProductions.com. And then this podcast posts on Podbeam every other Friday right now at noon. And we should be seeing videos of that up on the channel very, very soon. And we are now on iTunes. So you can find, if you go over Apple Podcasts and just type in DM Shower Thoughts or the DM Shower Thoughts podcast, it should pop up for you, and go check us out if you're not one to use Podbean. It's awesome. All right, everybody, have a wonderful day, and please, game responsibly. Bye-bye now.